My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. What does it mean to be a lightworker in the 21st century? And how may those with the calling prepare themselves for the challenges? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dana Micucci, shares her personal journey of spiritual transformation, including travel to high-frequency power spots and the lessons she learned. Dana Micucci is an award-winning author, spiritual teacher, speaker, and healer. Her spiritual travel memoir, Sojourns of the Soul, One Woman's Journey Around the World and Into Her Truth, is a gold winner of the Nautilus Book Awards, was inspired by her travels to many of the world's most sacred sites. A dynamic speaker and teacher practitioner of ancient mystery school wisdom, she conducts transformational talks, workshops, and sacred journeys worldwide. Her website is danamicucci.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and new book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited Dana Micucci. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Victor. Hello to you as well. It was really fun running into you at the New Life Expo in New York City just about a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I had received some of your publicist's mailings asking if I was interested in interviewing you. And then when I saw you were going to be at the New Life Expo, I figured I'd approach you directly. So it was wonderful. A wonderful synchronicity that we're able to connect on that level. So thank you.
Yes, definitely. I love synchronicities.
So Dana, please share your early path and how it shaped your understanding of this world that we live in.
Okay, Victor. Yes. Well, like for so many of us, it's a long and winding path. I guess we could start with my time when I was a young journalist in New York City. And I lived in Manhattan for 22 years, and I wrote about culture, art, and travel, and it was really fun. I got to travel the world, and at the same time, there was so much more going on for me on my spiritual path and the path of healing, where I was exploring a lot of different healing modalities and just immersing myself in as many different wisdom traditions as possible. I couldn't get enough of it, but my magazine assignments really were vehicles that ignited greater and greater self-growth. And so I would choose places around the world that were mostly sacred sites that I had always wanted to visit. And somehow I would find an article to go with it. And I'd have to convince my editor that I should go to Bali or India or Egypt or whatever. It was a journey that was very exciting. This was started, I guess, in my early 30s. And that became the foundation for my book, my first spiritual book. I wrote some books. I was, as I said, being an art journalist, writing about culture, art, and travel. I did write some books about art, but I consider my latest books, which are all about spirituality and the commonalities of the world's wisdom traditions and my personal experiences with them, often at sacred sites. I consider my first spiritual book, Sojourns of the Soul, One Woman's Journey Around the World and Into Her Truth. And so the articles, as I mentioned, were catalysts, the magazine articles, to get me to these places. And so much more was happening to me along the way, Victor. Just many different mystical insights and revelations. And I felt myself growing and expanding. And I wanted to share that with the world. So that book came out in 2011. It actually won a gold medal in the Nautilus Book Awards. It was a very, we'll just say it was a formative book and really laid the foundation for my later books. After that, I'd always had an interest in fiction. I actually took classes at Columbia University's creative writing program while living in New York City, and had started a novel which is by now 22 to 25 years ago. And that novel is called The Third Muse. Very long labor of love. And it is an international art world mystery. But threading through it, Victor, are the divine feminine teachings of Mary Magdalene and the Magdalene Order. So it's really kind of a multi-layered book, and people can approach it, or receive from it whatever they are ready to receive or want to receive. And I was really, really pleased when that finally came out in 2014. And so that was my first novel. After that, my husband is an artist, and we collaborated on a card deck called Paradise Found Oracle, in which I was able to share what I call the secret mystery school wisdom of the ages with a broader audience. And this oracle, as you know, you choose a card and then you go to the page and read the message, all of it divinely guided by spirit, as is all of my work. And so after that came my latest book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Again, this was in the works probably most of my life on the inner planes, but I really started writing it, I'd say maybe about 4 years ago. And I consider it a sequel to Sojourns of the Soul, the book I mentioned earlier, because most of the chapters are about my adventures at sacred sites, but this time leading groups on planetary missions, doing what I call ascension energy work, working with planetary grids and creating a community for light workers to gather and to assist our own personal evolution as well as the evolution of the collective. So there's a lot more I could say about this book, but I'll leave it to you now. So that's kind of my trajectory. And in the meantime, I have long had a private practice based on my shamanic training over 25 years, private healing practice, and a mentorship. So I do shamanic soul retrievals. I also do vibrational healing and what I call spiritual attunements. So the healing sessions have also been a big part of my work. They're one-on-one and sometimes group-oriented. In the meantime, created a lot of audio products based on, again, the secret wisdom of the ages. We'll call it an initiation into the esoteric wisdom of the ages, which for a long time, Victor, as you know, was not really readily available to most people. And this is kind of the hidden wisdom of the ancient mystery schools, ranging from the mystery schools of Egypt to the Essenes in the Holy Land to the priests and priestesses of Avalon, the Cathars in the south of France, the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, and so many more. All of that kind of weaves together into my whole body of work, which also includes continuing to take people on sacred journeys, taking groups of light workers to sacred sites around the world. And I'm planning another journey for next October to Peru and Bolivia, where we'll delve deeply into Andean shamanism and the mystical wisdom of the Inca.
Wonderful. What are you doing on Tuesday? Let's talk a little bit about the years of living dangerously. It opens in the introduction with a story that is literally out of this world. Would you share a little of that introduction with our listeners?
Yes. I had this dream, which was really more of a vision, Victor, that really never left my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it has to do with, it could have, I don't like the word abduction. I wasn't abducted. I feel that I was taken, however, onto a spaceship with a very benevolent being of light. It could have been a Pleiadian, an Arcturian. I'm not quite sure what star system this being was from, but, he looked fairly humanoid. He was the captain of a spaceship. And I was standing at the helm of the ship with him, traveling through the far reaches of our galaxy. And we landed in a place that I didn't, it's kind of circling back to closer to Earth. That reminded me of what maybe Mars would look like. I haven't really been there, even in my shamanic journeys, which, as you know, happen in the etheric realm. But I don't want to say exactly. But it felt like it could be because I remember a red mist, and I remember, humans living there in row houses and things that looked very similar to what we have here on Earth. The only difference is that Terra, the blue jewel, was suspended in the night sky, and so I knew I wasn't on Earth because I could see her in the sky. And so, as I relate in the book, I was welcomed into the home of two of the inhabitants of this very kind of interdimensional place, and they offered me some tea, and we started talking. And the woman said, "Oh, you must be an Earthling. You must be from planet Earth." And they tried to convince me to stay on this planet where I had landed. And immediately I knew that this was not where I was supposed to be. They said, "Oh, they're going to blow themselves up. You have to leave now." We and many others, humans, left a long time ago. And as you could see, we live a very similar life here. But I, looked out the window at that moment, and again, just kind of really my gaze falling on planet Earth, suspended in the night sky, gorgeous, just lit up, so radiant, the blue and the green. And right then and there, I said, "No, I'm not staying here." And as soon as I said that, I was immediately back on the ship, and then back in my bed in my home. So I realized that I've always known this, but I feel that vision, that meeting, whatever, is probably beyond a dream, Victor, even though I initially called it that, reminded me of the contract that I had here on Earth. And probably like you and others of us on a spiritual path for many, many years, and we've probably done this through many lifetimes, we're old souls. We can be called old souls. And so, I've had some ancient memories, like some of us do, of being in various places at various times on this earth. And my soul felt very, very old, and that I was back on another assignments of light, as a light worker. And people say, "Oh, Dana, what is a light worker?" Is that I never want to say that this is anything special, Victor. Everyone who holds light, who practices a virtuous life and leads from the heart, I feel is a light worker, whether they consciously call themselves that or not. I mean, perhaps, one of their missions is simply uplifting everybody in their wake as they move about their daily life. The person behind the counter at Starbucks, or somebody they meet in another store, or everything is sacred. So when I talk about taking light workers to sacred sites around the world, these are people who consciously have stepped on this path in planetary service. And that's what I mean about calling myself a light worker. I knew from a very young age, and it's somewhere in the book where I must have been around 8 years old, and I remember asking God to use me, just use me. And what does an 8-year-old know about that? Nothing really, but it felt like the right thing to do. And so as a vessel, of light and awareness, and my work really became much more publicly devoted to this, what I call light work, holding and emanating the light in various ways, through my books, through my talks and speaking engagements, through my journeys to sacred sites where I lead groups, through my even one-on-one work and my mentorships and healing sessions. So that was a pivotal moment for me, almost a reminder, when I was taken to this off-world place, which felt like another planet, that no, I had a commitment, I had an assignment to fulfill. And having been a journalist for so many, 22 years in New York City, that word is so familiar to me, an assignment. So this is my It's my mission, and I feel very grateful to be able to use my gifts in service in this way.
You talked about old souls, and I know
Mhm.
that I'm an old soul. You know that you're an old soul. One of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is I've come in contact with people that I have not consciously met in this lifetime, but I recognize them immediately. And you are one of those people. Are we all old souls?
You know, that's a great question. Yes, I know that feeling of recognizing someone, of their soul signature. And I do feel that, yes, we are all, well, let's just say most of us are old souls, having been on this planet for many lifetimes. For those listeners who do, believe in reincarnation, which I do, and that we come back again and again to master schoolhouse planet Earth, as Edgar Casey called it, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yes, I feel that so many of us have been here before. Now, how many times have been here before? That's another question. That said, I do feel that there are newer souls, souls who haven't had as much experience on this earth plane. And it's a feeling, it's not really a thought. It's just a feeling that I might have when I meet someone, or maybe a soul from another star system who's here for the first time.
Mm.
But this connection to Gaia, Terra, the blue jewel, which are, as you know, all names for planet Earth, for me at least, runs very, very deep and feels very old. I mean, I'm feeling like billions of years old, right?
Yeah.
And many, many lifetimes coming here to be of service. And those of us who come here, I feel that we've come to master the duality experiment because this is a duality plane. And who knows? On other planets, in other star systems, I'm sure there are other types of learning schools. But for us, this is the duality school. And that's why so much of what is taught and practiced in the ancient mystery schools, or what was taught and practiced, has to do with integrating all of these dualities within ourselves so that we can unify them and therefore transcend them into a single whole being of light, to become a single whole being of light. So everything, if we look around, we see that everything we experience is defined by opposites. The obvious light and dark, spirit and matter, the head and the heart, the sacred and the sensual, heaven and earth. It goes on, hot and cold.
Just
Hmm.
out of curiosity, there's been a lot of studies that show the possibility that there was life at one time on Mars, and they're starting to find structures and so on the red planet. And I'm just wondering if you have a sense from your experiences and your travels that perhaps at one time Mars was our home, and something happened catastrophically,
Hmm.
and we wound up here.
I definitely feel that that's a possibility. I've heard that theory. Definitely feel that, as well as perhaps other planets. There could be, and now we're kind of, getting into more of the interstellar consciousness. There, there could be people living there now. I mean, what I was shown could actually be there. This could actually be a reality on this other planet that looked to me like Mars. So I completely agree with you, yes. As well as perhaps coming from other planets, not just Mars. But I do feel that we are so expansive as souls, whether we've been on this earth for many, many lifetimes, billions of years, or whether you just touched down here from Sirius or in your first lifetime on Earth. Either way, our souls are so expansive. We are so much more than we think we are. And that is pure consciousness. And I know and I'm sure that given your long time on a spiritual path, that you know about A Course in Miracles. And in A Course in Miracles, which was one of my great teachers, it says that we are not bodies in space and time. And
Absolutely.
more, I really feel that.
We had talked about synchronicities, and you say you love synchronicities. I've had so many of them
Mhm.
since my spiritual awakening in my mid to late 30s. Tell us
Mhm.
about some of yours.
Yes, so many, so many. And I write about a lot of them in my book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker, that my new book, and also in my other books. Let me talk about a very miraculous journey to the Holy Land that I took. I took personally, myself and my husband went in 2015, and then I received an assignment from Spirit that I was to take a group of light workers to the Holy Land to anchor ascension energies there. Now, this is before, there's always been a lot of conflict in that part of the world, and it's before recent times, because that was in 2018. So, people were traveling there. I remember when I received this assignment, it had been very difficult to attract the certain number of light workers that I needed. Whereas in most of my other trips, people would sign up right away. And I had to have at least 10 people. Normally on my sacred journeys, I could have anywhere from 12 to 24 people. But for this journey, I had to have at least 10 people because, in the business end of it, I work with tour companies, et cetera, and I have certain obligations. So I just couldn't understand. There were people who were interested, but things would come up and then they couldn't come, or I'd get these last minute cancellations. And it was maybe a day before I had to let the tour company know if we were coming. And I had to show that there were at least 10 people, which for me is a very small group. And I didn't know what I was going to do. In the meantime, when I started writing the itinerary for this sacred journey, we went to many different PowerPoints associated with the Essenes. And I'm very close to the Essene lineage. And that's a whole other story. There's a whole other synchronicity involved in that, which happened in New York City. And so I remember taking a break from writing the itinerary, going into my living room, left my office, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, a very unusual type of music began playing on my computer. I had never heard it before. And I don't listen to music when I work, so nothing was turned on in that regard. And I came back into the office and wrote down some of the words and looked it up. It was a celebratory Hebrew song. And so it was as if Spirit had sent me this song to say, yes, this is, well, for me, it was a major synchronicity. Yes, this is divinely ordained. You are going to take a group to the Holy Land. And that was maybe a few weeks before I reached this deadline. Then there were other messages, which I can't recall now, that this was definitely in the cards, that this had to be done. And I just thought, this makes no sense. I don't even have 10 people. And tomorrow, I have to tell the tour company that we're not coming. That made no sense to me whatsoever, especially after the miracle / synchronicity I just described to you. Well, what happened? And then, Victor, everything, as we know, is a test for us. Everything. Every single moment of our lives. And I thought, Dana, you cannot go into anxiety. You cannot get off your center. You cannot go into any worrying about this. So I really just very, very gently had to let all of this go and totally, to use a metaphor, fall back into the arms of Spirit, and which we hear about all the time. Just let go and allow God to lead the way. And as soon as I did that, when I just said, okay, whatever's supposed to happen will happen. It doesn't make sense, but I will allow it and accept whatever happens. As soon as I made that inner shift, I received an email from one of my clients who had signed up for the trip. There were 9 of us, right? I needed that extra person, asking if her daughter might join us. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, that was really something. And so at the nth hour, I received the 10th person, and there were 10 of us on this journey. Now, what happened when we got to the Holy Land was really just off the charts in terms of what I would call miraculous. And I also want to say that everyone has the capacity to create and receive miracles. This doesn't happen because you're special or whatever. We all have this capacity. So, of course, when you go to highly charged sacred places, where the energy of the land of the earth is so powerful because so many of them exist at the intersection of electromagnetic ley lines, and also where the veils between dimensions are very thin, so that you have direct access to the cosmos, to cosmic wisdom. And I find that in all of these sacred sites, including the Holy Land as a whole, that these two aspects are always prevalent. So that's to say that when we do travel to such sites with such heightened frequencies, that perhaps we're more in the flow than we might normally be in our daily lives. It's almost like an ascension accelerator. And by ascension, Victor and we've all heard that word. I simply mean moving to higher dimensions of consciousness. And that's an infinite journey, which we are all on in the Holy Land, as if I didn't really need any other confirmations that we were supposed to be there. But the miracles began to flow, and especially by the end of the journey at the Sea of Galilee, which was so ethereal, so transcendent and interdimensional. It was just one after another, where, let's say, for example, beyond a synchronicity had an instant precipitation, which the Ascended Masters speak about. Instant precipitations are precipitations of objects that just show up. For example, you could be walking down the road saying, oh, it's really sunny. I wish I had a baseball cap or a hat. And then literally in that moment, you reach down because there's a hat on the side of the road, a precipitation of the object. So this was happening in the Holy Land. So it takes manifestation to a whole other level, where one incident was I needed a matchbox because I create altars for our sacred work, and this last meeting was outside, and I thought, oh, I forgot my matches. I have to go back to the room. Well, then I walked by a table, and there was a matchbox that had precipitated because it was not on that table when I walked by it to start the meeting for our group. Then, I guess later on that night, this is really crazy. I remember getting up from bed. I had my robe on, and a shekel fell out of my robe, a golden shekel, which is the currency that they use in Israel. It just fell out of I mean, that is so crazy. You don't carry money in your robe, right? I didn't even have pockets. So then these shekels started appearing. And even earlier in the journey, we were meeting in a meeting room of this hotel in Jerusalem, where I had stayed before and where I had received another miracle / synchronicity. This time, on this second trip, having brought a group, we were meeting in a meeting room. There was no one else in this very deserted corridor of the hotel. No one knew what we were doing. I like to stay under the radar when we do this work. And we came back for the second meeting the following morning, and there was a perfect white heart drawn on the black oak door of the meeting room, and it was in white ash. And so I'm kind of getting the tingles as I relay all of this, and I wrote about it in my book because there's a whole chapter about that planetary mission to the Holy Land in my book, The Years of Living Dangerously. So those are just some, and it couldn't have been a human who created such a perfect heart with white ash. So of course I immediately thought, well, that's the Essenes, my Essene soul family, Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, who I work with closely, that they were reaching out to us, letting us know that they knew we were there. And there were so many others, Victor. So those are just a few examples that stand out in my life. There were some big ones in Egypt and even, in my daily life constantly. And even something as simple, which many of us have experienced, of thinking about a person and they call you in that moment. Or you're thinking about doing something new in your life, or doing something new with your work, and the exact people and resources you need just show up without any effort on your part. So that's when you know that you're in the flow, the divine flow of abundance, I call it, and you're aligned with your mighty I Am presence in direct connection with Spirit God. And for me, because, you have to ask yourself, well, why do these things happen? And they're speeding up more and more because, Everyone is moving forward on their spiritual path, whether people consciously know it or not, because the energies on the planet are just so powerful now and accelerated, coming from the sun. Number one, with all of the solar events we experience, the coronal mass ejections, sunspots, solar activity has never been higher. The sun is a massive ascension accelerator, meaning assisting us in moving to higher consciousness more quickly than we may have without these accelerated solar events and other cosmic phenomena. So it's a time on Earth that is very exciting because we have so much assistance from the higher realms of light and Mother Earth herself, which is Mother Earth, just as we are, is becoming more and more crystalline. And that's less and less magnetic, shall we say, because we're defined by a plane of electromagnetics. But when you think about crystals and their properties, I mean, that just takes one's frequency and the frequency of the planet to a whole new level. Those are some of the synchronicities, which I also call miracles. But then again, a lot of the great mystics would say, miracles are your birthright. Miracles should be commonplace. It's just that we've been conditioned to think that they're special. But so much of it, how did they happen? I kept asking myself, and they would happen when I was very grounded in my body, I noticed. Not flying out through my crown, and which is easy to do in a spiritual path. You want to connect with your star families and whoever else, but to be very grounded in your body on this earth, and to be centered, your attention focused at your heart center, which means that you are present. You're present in the moment, and that's a practice, and that's not an easy practice. The practice of presence, as you well know from your spiritual path. And, we have a lot of wisdom traditions that have given us many wonderful meditations to help us be more present. That's what I found, Victor. When the synchronicities speed up, the miracles speed up, when we are present and not distracted by worries about the future or memories about the past.
And maintaining an attitude of gratitude.
Yes. And given that we are just moved through Thanksgiving, how appropriate. Absolutely.
My guest is Dana Micucci. Her new book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Dana, please share with our listeners where they can get all of your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
Oh, thank you, Victor. Yes, they can go to my website, which is www.danamicucci.com, and I'll spell that out, DANAMICUCCI.com. And all of my books are there with links to where you can purchase them on Amazon. There's other information about my upcoming events. There's a bio, and also there is information about my healing sessions and my audio products, which I created to assist people on their spiritual path in their ongoing expansion, and to know, that they're not alone, that they are always supported, whether it's by another human on the earth plane or especially by God, by spirit, what I call the higher guiding force that is always conspiring on our behalf, no matter what our external circumstances are.
Absolutely. We'll be back with more of Dana after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Dana Micucci. We're talking about her new book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Why did you use the word dangerously in the title?
That's a great question, Victor. And I felt that people would be asking me that. So the danger, I use the word because number one, it pulls people in. And number two, that's how I often felt on a lot of these spiritual planetary missions that I took, which the book chronicles, again, that I led with groups of other light workers that I organized and led. Now, what happens is, again, given that we live on a duality plane, you have all of the opposites that define our experience, as I mentioned earlier, light and dark being one of them. And so at this particular time, now this goes back to, wow, I mean, this covers a period of over a decade, right? So it's not happening right now, but the book goes back in time, I'd say, a little over a decade. And times on this planet, as we know, have been very challenging. There is a lot of light that is anchoring, and at the same time, there's a lot of shadow. And the shadow, we could say, is collective shadow, coming up for witnessing and for resolving, integrating really, because we don't want to push the shadow away. We want to see, we all have a shadow side. And we want to see it for what it is and take the lessons that it brings us, the deep, deep, powerful lessons, and own it fully versus rejecting it or trying to escape it or whatever. Now, what's happened on the planet, as we can see playing out with, unimaginable horrors, which we don't even need to go into. We hear about it every day. That's been going on for quite a while, a very, very long time, since the days of Atlantis, when the Atlanteans, who became so advanced and had such a technological prowess, and were also, many of them, very, very spiritually attuned, that the ego began to take over, and they became held hostage by the love of power versus the power of love. And so as a result, all of this incredible technology was used not for the greater good, but for purposes of conflict and self-destruction. And we know that Atlantis sunk into the ocean. So many of the lessons of ancient Atlantis, I did a retreat/sacred journey in Atlantis, in one of the epicenters of Atlantis, which was called Poseida. And this, Edgar Cayce pointed out, exists off the coast of Florida in the area of Bimini Island. So that's a whole other conversation, but to get back to dangerously. So I'm just kind of laying the foundation about the epic battle between light and dark. It's defined our whole existence. It continues. I feel that we are eventually coming to the end of it. We're more and more, let's say, coming out of it, even though it's not apparent on the physical. Because the new earth, which is the earth of light, of fairness, of justice, of love and abundance and harmony for all, without wars, without conflicts, that exists in a frequency that is available now to all of us who tune our radio, our inner radio, to align with that frequency. And we can live in the new earth frequency all the time, which is a fifth dimensional frequency, which moves beyond separation. It moves beyond the duality experiment and conflict. We're waiting for this to anchor in the physical so that we can see it here in our 3D reality, which again is also changing. I mean, we're multidimensional beings and we have access to everything everywhere. And so we can surf the dimensions, we can be in this world but not of it, like all of the ancient mystics modeled for us as the way forward on our spiritual path. But this danger comes into play when we are at the eye of the storm of the epic battle between light and dark, and some might say good and evil. I like to say light and dark. And in the Bible, and I'm on an alternative spiritual path outside of religion, although I allow that religion helps many people. So I'm not a Bible scholar by any means, but I do know a little bit about it. And in the Bible, these powers, these energies that are not of the light are called principalities. And look, so many of our messengers, of our avatars, were up against the principalities. One of them being Jesus of Nazareth. We could point to these people who anchored so much light, these beings on the planet, let's say going back to Jesus of Nazareth, coming forward to Martin Luther King, for example. And we also have Mary Magdalene, who wasn't necessarily taken out, but her reputation was destroyed because she was called a prostitute and a woman who was not of the light, or that was the implication, and that couldn't be further from the truth. She was a fully self-actualized woman who walked the earth, who did embody the feminine face of the Christ. So we have John F. Kennedy. We have so many examples of very high-frequency beings who tried to anchor light on the planet, who were then taken out for doing this. Again, the epic battle between light and dark. They were taken out by the principalities, the powers that aren't always visible, by the way, that often work behind the scenes, that control this reality, or have tried to control it. Tried being a key word, because when we are connected to God and our own mighty I Am presence, no one can control us. It looks that way. And these beings lost their lives, and they were truth bringers, and truth is light. So anytime you stand in the truth of who you are, and you endeavor to anchor this truth, this light, in a very dense plane of existence, which is our third dimensional experience, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get interference, sabotage, from what I call, and these are amorphous anti-forces. That's my name for it, and that's what I refer to them throughout the book as, the amorphous anti-forces creating havoc, because this has been a very dense, dark plane of existence since the days of Atlantis. Yes, there is a lot of light, and there are so many people who hold and anchor the light and do it in different ways. Like I said, it's just that my work is more public. And so because my work is public, and because I put myself out there on the, quote, front lines, which is also in the title, I received a lot of pushback, meaning any obstacle you could imagine. Setbacks, sabotage, near extinction events. I mean, I was working with the ley lines at the San Andreas Fault, right near Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. And right after that, and that's a huge portal of light, opening up those ley lines to receive more light. Right after that, a massive, and I'm not saying a hurricane hit because of that. No, that's not true. But there was a massive hurricane. And after the hurricane, my husband and I walked down the beach, and we sat in a place that was very safe, very far back from the waves in the post-hurricane. And the ocean had significantly calmed. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be out walking on the beach. But we wanted to be careful as possible. And we sat very, very far back in a cove on a rock. And we were meditating. And at the time, I was actually offering gratitude to the water spirits for all of the blessings that they bring us. And very close to the water spirits and to, the elementals, spirits, and the spirits of the land and the ancestors of the land. And all of that became very important for me through my shamanic training. So, Victor, what happened was right in the middle of that meditation, a massive rogue wave. There's no explanation for it, because it didn't come from the surf forward like we expect a wave to come. It came from the right side, just rammed right into me. Of course, I had no idea what happened. And I was thrown up in the air by this wave, thrown, I don't know, 10 feet in the air, and then taken very far down the beach from where we were sitting. Then I woke up and found myself on the sand, which was filled with rocks, by the way. And I landed in one of the very, very few spots where there weren't any rocks. It was a small area. And all I ended up with was a stubbed toe, if you can believe that. But that is something that could easily have taken me out. I felt that it was an energetic retaliation for the light work that I was doing with the San Andreas Fault. My husband watched in horror as this massive rogue wave carried me down the beach. And of course, he thought he would never see me again. So it really was a miracle that I was protected. So that, that is dangerous, right? So events like that. Now that's an extreme example, but there were other examples that I write about, and I have a chapter on my missions to Mount Shasta, which is really one of the most powerful vortexes of light in North America, if not the world. Mount Shasta, California. It's in Northern California near the Oregon border. And many ascended masters have etheric retreats there, including our beloved Master Saint Germain, who I'm also very close to. And their energies are so vast and so profound and very accessible in a place like Mount Shasta. So not to mention the incredibly magical earth energies and the energy of the fairyland, of the elementals and the sprites, and it's such a place that's so alive. Like you can see the plants vibrating. They're colors that I've never seen before. I did several missions there at Mount Shasta. So my first mission, I went out, wasn't a great idea, but I went out scouting by myself in the forest. Now I love to hike. I'm very close to nature. I have no fear about nature, but I probably should not have been going by myself on this mountain. And I found a rock formation that I'd been in search of. And then I sat up there and meditated for a while in the most exquisite energies. And then I started walking back. Walking back, I realized that the light had shifted. That can happen in the blink of an eye, where the sunlight shifts and the path looks different. So I walked, and I had no idea where I was. I retraced my steps up the mountain, found that rock formation, and I started over again. I still took the wrong path because the sunlight had shifted. So to make that story a little shorter, I got lost in the woods on Mount Shasta, which really was, not a very was a very uncomfortable and very unpleasant experience. And I found my way. I had no idea. I was so disoriented. Found my way to an area. It was all just incredibly wooded. Okay. And I sat down on a log and I thought, oh no, now what? My group was arriving the following day. For some reason, and we could call this a synchronicity, Victor, I had packed one piece of paper in my backpack, and on that piece of paper was the telephone number of the ranger's office. So I thought, well, what are the chances that I could even have service here in this remote area? But sure enough, I was able to get through to the ranger's office, breathed a sigh of relief, thought, okay, it's going to be fine. So he said, ma'am, just try to stay calm. And, I'm going to call you back. We want to ping you, whatever ping means, where they can somehow trace where your phone is. And then they could locate my exact location. So he called me back and he said, we're showing that you're up in McLeod. McLeod is a town near Mount Shasta. It was like 20 miles, 30 miles away. I said, no, I'm on the mountain. I told you I'm on the mountain. And I had left my car at this Red Fir Flat, which is like a well-known area there. And he said, well, ma'am, I'm sorry, but we can't locate you. So we're probably going to have to airlift you off the mountain. And I thought, oh my gosh, airlift me. And I thought, okay, well, so be it. I'll get into a helicopter. And he said, but it won't be until tomorrow. And then I'm looking around the woods thinking, oh my gosh, all of the bears, the mountain lions, whatever. And I was going to have to spend the night in the woods on the mountain. Well, to me, that was a dangerous situation that I unknowingly got myself into. And I just went deeper and deeper into meditation, connecting with the fairies and the elementals and the spirits of the land and the nature spirits and the ascended masters of Saint Germain and all of it. And I just felt this incredible calm wash over me. At one point, I was thinking of calling one of my clients saying, "You're going to have to take over the retreat because I'm lost on the mountain." And I just, again, that lesson in just letting go and trust, one of the big lessons of life, and especially on a spiritual path. And so I did. And not long after, as I drifted deeper into meditation, I heard something that sounded like a car horn. And I just followed the sound. And I ran as fast as I can. I injured myself in the process, ran and ran and ran until, and I was exhausted, by the way. I was just really, and my water was gone, and it was not a good situation. And so I was finally rescued by the sheriff when I got down to the road. And of course, he scolded me, and he had every right to do so. And however, why did that happen? We could ask. Yes, it was a lesson in trust, a lesson in letting go. But also, I felt that it was energetic retaliation for the work that I and a group of light workers were about to do at one of the most powerful energetic vortexes in North America. So those are just some examples of, it became so obvious, Victor, a tit for tat retaliation. The further I ventured into the light, the more pushback I received.
My guest, Dana Micucci, her book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker, will be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Dana Micucci, her book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Dana, what advice would you offer our listeners to stay calm, peaceful, and present when the world appears to be falling apart?
Oh, yes, Victor, that's a question that we all wonder about these days, I think. And for me, I could just speak from my own experience, is, I use the words gather inward, to gather inward as much as possible, to free yourself from all of the static interference around you, all of the distractions. We have so many these days, especially with technology and, our cell phones, everything, social media, whatever it is. And just gather inward to just keep recentering. There is a wonderful practice that has really assisted me on my path, and I still use it. It's an ancient Toltec practice. They were Mesoamerican indigenous peoples, the Toltecs, and it's called stalking oneself, stalking, and it's simply to notice where your attention is in every moment. And, are we worried about something, or do we feel anxious, or do we feel a fear or a doubt or whatever? And that's fine. We're all human, and those things will come up. But simply to notice how that has thrown you off center. And for me, the center is the still point at our sacred hearts. That is the center. That is where the temporal and eternal intersect. And it is a place of unity, beyond separation, beyond the us versus them paradigm that is so prevalent in our reality. And so to just keep bringing your attention back to your heart center. And when your attention is at your heart center, you are automatically more present. You are more grounded in your body, which is so important on a spiritual path. And I call this the practice of a divine embodiment. Because if we're not fully in our bodies, we can't be of service most effectively. So that is, just noticing, and without blame, just bringing your attention back to your heart center. We have so many wonderful meditations and teachings from all the world's wisdom traditions, which I go into deeply in the chapters of the Years of Living Dangerously. There's a lot of ancient wisdom and how it applies to us today. And I also offer meditations and what I call activations, because they're associated with various symbols from sacred geometry that function as spiritual tools for people to get back to that place of center.
Absolutely. My guest, Dana Micucci, her book, The Years of Living Dangerously, Lessons from the Front Lines of a 21st Century Lightworker. Dana, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get all of your wonderful books and find out more about you and your work.
Yes, Victor, thank you. Yes, they can go to my website, which is danamicucci.com. So that is www.danamicucci.com. And they can find my books, descriptions of my books, links to purchase the books on Amazon, information about my upcoming events, my healing sessions, and all of the tools that I offer through my audios that I created to assist people on their spiritual path. And so that they continue to feel uplifted and inspired and transformed.
Dana, thank you for sharing information and wisdom that is so important in our world today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Victor. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.